People have always been interested in the past. We tend to think of historians as a modern invention, but there's always been people willing to dig a bit deeper into the past. Around 450 BC, in ancient Greece, Herodotus of Halicarnassus wrote one of the very first history books when he traced the origins of the civilizations around him in the Mediterranean. Since then, nearly every literate culture has produced works on history. Welcome to the second episode of the History Toolkit, where you too can learn the skills and investigative techniques used by real historians and master the past yourself. In this episode, we'll see how historians use the work of other historians, otherwise known as historiography. In our last episode, we discussed the difference between primary and secondary sources. We talked about how primary sources are anything made by people in the time period we are studying. Secondary sources are anything which concerns the past but were made afterwards. Secondary sources can be anything from movies and television shows to textbooks and the work of professional historians. Obviously, not all secondary sources are equally trustworthy. In this video, we're going to talk specifically about the secondary sources created by professional historians. When a historian does original research and publishes on it, they are contributing to our collective body of knowledge on the past. However, this research is usually not directed initially at the general public. It is written for a specialist audience of other scholars and historians, and is published in peer-reviewed academic books and journals. Peer review means that a group of experts on whatever subject the historian wrote about have reviewed his or her work prior to publication and have testified that it meets the minimum standards of research. The book or article is then published and contributes to the growing body of knowledge on a given subject. The term historiography refers to this body of knowledge created by many different historians on a given subject. It is important to remember that the word historiography is not about the past per se, but rather about the historians. Not about the past, but about historians. Every time a historian publishes a book or article, they are contributing to this historiography. Many subjects in history have been studied for years and years, and in some cases, even centuries. This means that there is a lot written on any given subject. Not surprisingly, if you look within this historiography, there are often huge differences of opinion. What we know about the past changes over time. New historians come along and propose new theories. Later historians may agree or propose alternatives. Let me give you an example. In 1536, the King of England, Henry VIII, closed all the Christian monasteries in England. Now, you may have heard of this guy, Henry VIII. He had 6 wives, 2 of whom he had executed. Yeah, that guy. Anyway, for nearly 500 years, most historians thought that when Henry closed all these monasteries in England, he was doing them a favor. That not only were they largely empty, but that the monks and nuns living inside them were not really that religious anymore, and in fact were living very decadent, luxurious lives. For nearly 500 years, when historians talked about the dissolution of monasteries, they emphasized its inevitability. Late medieval monasteries were presented as lackluster institutions with worsening standards and even sexual promiscuity. As a result, since the dissolution, late medieval monks and nuns have been presented as naughty characters. But was it true? However, more recently, historians have suggested that this is not accurate. They argue that for the most part, they were just regular monks and nuns, no worse or better than monks and nuns had ever been. Now, it was not some new discovery which changed the historiography. Different historians looked at the same evidence and came up with different conclusions. So when we talk about historiography, remember, we're not talking about the past. We're talking about different historians' opinions on the past and how those opinions changed over time.